Hi, everyone, and welcome back. We have another special episode and giveaway this week for you with Missy Ballone of Wellness for Makers. This week's episode, we have a conversation with Missy Ballone, the creator and author of Wellness for Makers, where we talk all about what wellness actually is, who and what a maker is, and how wellness can support the creative practice and a creative lifestyle. And Missy and I are joining forces to collaborate on a giveaway just for you. So this week, if you leave a review for the How the Wise One Grows podcast, preferably a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, you can enter to win a copy of Missy's Wellness for Makers book and a handmade dream jar made by me to help all your wishes come true. All you have to do is, again, leave that review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite streaming platform. And if you want a bonus entry, you can follow at Holly's Azure and at Wellness for Makers on Instagram. Everybody's learning. Everybody's growing. Everybody's got to start somewhere. Hi, everyone, and welcome to How the Wise One Grows. Before we get started today, let's take a moment to land here together. So just situate yourself, get comfortable wherever you are. And if it feels safe for you, if you're not driving, you can rest your eyes. Otherwise, just soften your gaze. And really notice now where your body touches the earth. And feel your spine lengthen and your shoulders soften down the back. Inhale, fill your chest, fill your belly with air. And exhale, open your mouth, let it go. Inhale, fill the chest, fill the belly with air. Exhale, open your mouth, let it out. One more inhale. And exhale. And you can slowly return to this space and just start to notice it as if arriving for the very first time. I'm so excited to introduce you all to our special guest today, Missy Graff Ballone. Missy is founder and podcast host of Wellness for Makers and the author of Wellness for Makers, a movement guide for artists. Missy's mission is to motivate and empower creatives through education, mindful living, and movement. Missy uses her background as an artist, alignment-based yoga instructor, RYT 500, and licensed massage therapist to make information about the body accessible to artists everywhere. Thank you so much for being here today, Missy.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored.
We were talking about this a little before we started, but I've been following Missy's Instagram account, Wellness for Makers, for a few years now because I have been working with pottery for most of my life and was teaching ceramics almost full time for a while there and teaching a lot of yoga and mindfulness for potters specifically. So I always loved seeing your tips and techniques on how we can support our bodies as we're working at, for me it was the wheel, but really any medium that we're working with.
Absolutely. And I love that. And I love that, we have a common passion for educating artists and craftsmen and, people of all kinds and to live healthier lives and, feel good while making.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm really curious, like everything I read in your bio, artist, yoga instructor, and massage therapist, three amazing things. Do you mind sharing a bit about your background with each of those art forms?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I have always, been into art and been, considered myself an artist since I was very young. And, I grew up with a single mom and, I knew that art school was really important to me and where I wanted to go, but I needed a fallback plan. and a way to work my way through school. So I actually, enrolled in massage therapy right after high school to be able to have a job that paid pretty well. And I thought it was just going to be a fallback plan, honestly. But once I got to school, I really fell in love with the material. Learning about the body felt really empowering to me. And I felt like it was information that we should be learning, in school.
Absolutely.
So it became so much more. And while I was in massage school, I ended up kind of towards the end signing up into art school, and I was kind of doing both at the same time. I got a job at like a dream spa, like very holistic spa, that really cares about people. It's one of the best spas in New Jersey, the Urban Muse. I'll give a little shout out to them because they are wonderful. And I worked there for a long time, and it just became a part of, I don't know, who I am, very quickly. Mm-hmm. And throughout that experience, like working at the spa and everything, I was actually surrounded by a lot of creative people, a lot of musicians and artists and craftsmen that were all working at the spa as, massage therapists, estheticians, and, retail associates. And it was just like a really exciting, I don't know, time for me. And they all were so encouraging as I went through my fine art career. And after getting my bachelor's of fine arts, I was still working both things and doing all the artist hustle of multiple like jobs,
Yep.
like I was working at a gallery and a museum and working for an artist and all these different things, and still working at the spa and, trying to find my way. I enrolled into SUNY New Paltz for metalwork and jewelry for graduate school.
So is that your primary medium, is metalwork and jewelry?
Yeah, I totally went into school thinking I was going to be like, painter, and learned very quickly that I just like working three-dimensionally a lot. Yeah. And so I ended up going towards metalwork and jewelry, and gotten enrolled at SUNY New Paltz, and I fell in love with the Hudson Valley. While I was there, I kept talking about my background as a massage therapist. And, one of the teachers was like, why is this important to you that you introduce yourself and like, you're an artist in this program? Like, why are you telling me you're a massage therapist? Like, why should I care? And so that question, that like critique really kind of, I held it, and tried to understand what is it that's so important to me about this part of me, this background. And then there was a critic that came, and he was like, I want to see your perception of the body as a jeweler combined with your perception of the body as a massage therapist. Like, draw each of them and then see what happens. And that was a really pivoting moment in my art career, because I started, really creating these pieces that were made to be interacted with. They were jewelry, but they were conceptual pieces, right? Like the contemporary, they were meant to be interacted with, more art than like your everyday, necklace that you might wear out. They were meant to investigate and kind of, question the interior structures of the body. Like, what is connective tissue? How does it move? And what is it meant to do? And so I started making these pieces, but I really kept feeling like, I want to make more. I want to do more. How can I help artists? When we were in the program, honestly, we were all like super unhealthy. We weren't sleeping very well. We were in a lot of pain. We were working through pain. Many of us hitting burnout, headaches, like feeling dehydrated and hangry and all of the things, right? So, so that's a lot about my journey leading up to Wellness for Makers, but that's where it all kind of started.
So how did you start integrating the three?
Sure. Yeah. So basically the first, let's see. So after graduate school, I started, teaching. I was taking classes, all of the things that, artists do. And I was at Peters Valley School of Craft in Layton, New Jersey. And, I was talking to a group of makers at lunch one day, and they were all just, all of us were complaining about the aches and pains in our hands, myself included. Right.
Yeah.
And one of them said, we're all going to end up with arthritis, so we might as well just suck it up and deal with it. And it was that, that moment really impacted me to make me feel like I have a responsibility here. Like, I have a background in massage therapy. I have an understanding of yoga. I have, this, I have that. Like, there has to be a way to help the field, and in that moment I was like, no, there are things we can do. We can massage our hands, we can stretch. And they were like, yeah, okay. Right?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. So after that conversation, I went back to my room at Peters Valley, and I, pulled out my laptop and I started looking for a central resource. I was like, and I just started typing in Wellness for Makers. Like, where is the resource, and I couldn't find it, and so it doesn't mean that nothing existed, right? Like, if it did exist, it was like hard to come by. So there are artists out here like yourself, right, that are educating makers within their classes, that are using their backgrounds in yoga, massage therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and they're using those perspectives to teach their group of makers, right? But it was very hard to find them.
Yeah.
So in that moment, I was like, I have a responsibility here to create something, to use my background to do something. And, in the beginning, I didn't know what it was going to be totally. It was like, am I going to teach classes? Am I going to have a podcast? Am I going to have a blog? And it was just this beautiful, evolution of what it has become. Yeah.
I love that. As someone personally who's always integrated like all the parts of me to kind of navigate this life, I really love to hear how like it was almost like you couldn't explain yourself without those components. Like, you're in art school and you're like talking about your massage background. Like, it was just always present for you. To me, I kind of see it as like these parts of myself are just inextricably linked. Like, I think I've been so frequently told, pick one thing, be the expert at that, and do that. But what you've really highlighted is how, pulling from your background with wellness and your background with art, you're able to be this expert in a whole other area that wasn't getting so much voice and is meeting a real need.
Yeah. Thank you. I really felt like it was important the whole time to like hold on to all of these things. So, even if I wasn't actively massaging at the spa or whatever, like, it was very important to me to maintain my license. And in order to maintain your license, you have to, go through a certain amount of continuing education credits each year to show that you're actively learning and, staying up to date with the information. So, I don't know, Wellness for Makers has been really a wonderful way to integrate these many interests into something that, really comes together. And like I mentioned, in the beginning, I wasn't quite sure what it was going to be or, how it was going to come together. I started with teaching artists self-massage, right? Because I was a massage therapist, so I knew how to do that. In Peters Valley, they were like, we love it, so I was teaching classes at Peters Valley. They were super huge support. I've met a lot of artists from around the country that way. It was a really wonderful thing we did, I think 3 years in a row, because I lived in Jersey at the time. So I would commute up and do like a weekly class there. And while I was there, teaching them how to integrate massage into their practice and kind of figuring that all out, I was also researching artists, to interview. And at the time, it was just a blog that I was interviewing them for. And I had hoped to have a podcast one day, but I had no idea how to go about doing that just yet, you know?
Yep.
And I was finding really incredible people. Rebecca Mezoff, she's a weaver and an author and also an occupational therapist. And, you know, I learned about Kristen Kiefer, who's a ceramics artist, but she, you know, worked with John Glick and learned all about standing at the wheel and, you know, all of these amazing artists that, you know, I kind of started pulling them in to share their perspectives, right? So it's not just my perspective, but it's also people I respect and, you know, them sharing their unique perspectives and journeys as well. It just really, it was really nice. And eventually that evolved into the podcast, which was really cool and is really cool. There's over 50 episodes there. If you're not a listener, you know,
they're great. I've definitely been listening.
Yeah, it's like, it's a great thing to listen to in the studio when you're not listening to this podcast, of course.
Yes, of course.
You know, to check out and to, you know, the goal is to really, you know, help artists in the studio from a variety of perspectives and also my own. But while I was going through all of that, I also, a lot of people, I had been practicing yoga for many years, like since I was like 16, but I didn't have my certification yet. Like my, you know, I didn't go through the RYT trainings yet and all of the things. So while I was, you know, after I had kind of already started Wellness for Makers, a lot of people were assuming I was already a yoga instructor. And I was like, I got to make an adjustment here. You know? So I went through a program. I ended up at Yoga Mechanics in Montclair, New Jersey. I ended up kind of double dipping. I did 200 and 300 hour at the same time. And then after that, it was like a 2-year program. And then after that, I immediately did the 800 hours. I mean, not 800 total. So 300 after the 500. It was an incredible experience, you know, and it helped me to really keep bringing back all of this information to the artist community and everything I learn, whether it's from a massage workshop, you know, rock tape, you know, kinesiology tape, or, you know, yoga, all of these things kind of combining, bringing them together really is a really cool thing that I've been doing. And that eventually even evolved into the book. And I think that one of the things I believe that is most successful about it all is that I'm an artist myself, right? Like you mentioned, like, how did you integrate, like bring all these things together, right? Like as an artist myself, like I understand the aches and pains that go into having an active studio practice. I understand what it's like to prepare for a craft show. I understand what it's like to apply to exhibitions and not get in. I understand what it's like to apply to exhibitions and have to install those exhibitions. You know, like,
yep.
I understand what it's like to work in a gallery and, like, you know, help artists, assist them in every way possible. Like, I get it. And I think that's really important to the arts community as well, because when we have a common understanding, we can create connection. And when we have that connection, we can build trust. And when we have trust, we can start making positive changes in the body, which ultimately helps all of us to create a lifetime of making, which I think is what most of us want. So
I love that. Connection, trust, and positive transformation.
Absolutely.
I love that. So based off of your, you know, many facets, I would love to hear what's your definition of wellness. I feel like it's such a buzzword and there's so many meanings for it, but what is your definition of wellness?
Oh my goodness. You know what, Holly, you sent me these questions and I've been sitting here with this question for weeks going,
what is it?
You know what? And the thing is, I ask this question. I think it's a great question. I close with this question on my podcast all the time. And I always get stumbled when anyone like goes back at me and goes, well, what's yours? You know, because it is like, I love hearing all the different perspectives because wellness is truly unique to each person. It's going to be a little different to you than it is to me. And it might be different today than it is tomorrow. To me, I feel like my perception and perspective of wellness really shifts from season to season. But what stays consistent for me is movement, right? Like, and when I say movement, I don't mean working out at the gym for hours on end. Movement can be as simple as changing position, moving from sitting to standing, moving from,
Stretching your arms.
arms out, going for a walk for 5 minutes. Just change position. That's it. And so, again, this could be a 30-minute walk in a beautiful place. For me, I live very close to the river, and I spend every morning walking with my family and my dogs at the river, breathing in the fresh air, watching the seasons change. No matter the weather, we are there. And I do believe that whatever mood I might be in the morning, I get to the river and it helps me self-regulate walking around. It's a nice reminder of how beautiful life is. It's a nice reminder to take a breath. And, I don't know, it's to walk, when we go for a walk, even if it's a short 5-10 minute walk, like it increases blood flow and circulation. It sends that up to the brain. It allows us to, calm down. If we're walking and focusing on our breath for even 3 breaths, that's sending signals to your nervous system to calm down, to regulate. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Wellness to me is obviously also taking classes with my favorite instructors, getting those moments to kind of learn from them and hear their perspectives, tying that into my own life, listening to a favorite podcast or having a moment to draw is really nice. Right now, I've been really loving drawing on my baby. He's 8 months old, and I've been really enjoying drawing on toys for him.
Oh, that's awesome.
And making it really kind of magical and special in different ways. And, that's a big part of it. Another big part for me lately is, on this wellness journey is just savoring those moments of holding my baby, and like trying to like really experience being in the moment. And obviously not all day, every day, right? Like we're human, that's not possible. But like to just keep reminding myself to come back to this moment is definitely a big part of my definition of wellness.
I love the way that you explained your definition, and it reminds me a lot of mindfulness as a key component of wellness. It's unique for everyone, and it's this constant checking in the moment of unfolding of what do I need. And more importantly, I think when it comes to wellness, it's mindful awareness of what the body needs. So,
Absolutely.
There's that mind-body connection, but first by getting present, by being in the body, and then the mind can orient around that. So I love that you have like a wide range of what that can look like, and really acknowledging that it can and will change, and to honor that change by listening to your body and what it needs in those moments. And also that it expands beyond the body. Like, yes, it's that creativity. It's those moments of connection. It can be a really holistic approach to it.
Absolutely. One of the things I love about, this whole practice is like when we move more, the mind feels better, and then the spirit feels better, right? Like overall, like ourselves feel good. Yeah, totally. I agree.
I guess that leads me to our next question. Who or what is a maker from your perspective?
Yeah, the word maker is super broad, right? Like
yeah.
Anyone could be a maker. And honestly, it's up to you whether you define yourself as a maker. It can be an artist, a craftsman, a hobbyist, a florist, a tattoo artist. It's really up to you to decide whether or not you consider yourself a maker. And another maker might have stronger opinions and be like, no, you must go to, fine arts school to consider yourself a maker. And I think that there is a wide spectrum of what makes a maker. And so I think that there's a lot of people. I mean, going off of who follows me, I mean, there's people that I didn't imagine. Like, I wasn't expecting tattoo parlors to reach out to me, you know, like, okay, cool, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You are a maker. But like, I wasn't really, when I was first starting out with Wellness for Makers, I have a background in jewelry. So I obviously hit the jewelry world first. Then I reached out to ceramics and then like the other crafts. And it just expanded into like all these other worlds of who considers themselves a maker. And I love it. I love learning more each day.
Well, I love that maker is so broad because it's so accessible from any point. It's not limited to any one box. And I mean, if we think about it too, like we are all makers of our lives every day. Like each day you get up and you make choices and you're making and building a life. So really anyone can be a maker, and it can get more intricate into these areas that you grow and develop more and hone in your field. But it encompasses all of us if we allow it to.
I love that.
So how does wellness support makers from your perspective? I know we've touched a little on this, but I'd love to hear a bit more about your approach with it.
Sure. Whatever wellness practice you have, the way it will support you most, I believe, is to be consistent with it. So consistency is key to crafting new patterns in the body, to crafting new patterns in the mind, to crafting new patterns in the spirit. You know, if we say, you know, oh, I'm gonna, you know, I don't know, like I want to feel good, or I have terrible posture, and you just keep that mindset, I have terrible posture. All right, you're going to continue having terrible posture.
Just like that friend was like, we're all going to have arthritis.
Right, we're all going to have
like,
arthritis. All right.
Probably then.
You know, like, I don't know. Like, if that's your mindset, I mean, you're not going to create positive change in the body. If you're like, okay, I'm going to actively work with my body to create a stronger posture that supports me, then over time, you're going to maybe change those words to, I'm actively getting stronger each day, right? And that's going to encourage you to keep practicing having better posture. And even just the action of sitting up tall can help you build strength in your body to create a stronger posture. Because I know from experience and from a lot of the clients I've worked with, a lot of people say, well, it doesn't feel comfortable to sit up tall.
Mm-hmm.
It feels very uncomfortable. Well, I'm going to tell you that you are not alone. But if it is uncomfortable to sit up tall, if after, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, you're just sinking and rounding in your seat, that's just your body's way of communicating with you that you need to work on that area. You need to build a little more strength. You need to keep practicing this movement. Because over time, the more you do it, the stronger you're going to get. And then before you know it, you're holding a much stronger posture. I know for myself, I was with you. If that's who you are listening, that, you think you have terrible posture. I was like that too. And I blamed my scoliosis. I said all the things, and I felt like it was hard to breathe sitting up tall, like totally. I really did. And it took a lot of practice, a lot of dedication, a lot of consistency, but I can promise you that consistency is worth the effort, because you're going to start feeling a lot better, a lot stronger in your body. And ultimately I have less back pain. I have less headaches, all of the things. And so wellness is going to best support you if you are consistent about it. If you say, man, what?
Well, I was going to say, I think having consistency as a part of that working definition of wellness is so important, because it's not a one and done thing. It's going to take, yes, it can change, but it's going to require that you continue to show up.
Absolutely.
And that discomfort isn't bad either. I think we tend to shy away from discomfort all the time. But just like you were saying, it's kind of your body's way of communicating, maybe you should hang out here a little bit. Yeah. There's some growth that could happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of growth that can happen in the uncomfortable, for sure. And, the same goes for mindfulness practice, for meditation practice, for, pranayama breathwork practice. It can be hard and uncomfortable. And in the beginning, it's a challenge. But the more you do it, the more you're going to start to feel those results that other people experience. And, you know, most people are not like, you know, there's a lot of overthinking that happens with those types of practices as well, right? Like, oh, I'm just not good at meditating. You know, I don't know how to do breath work. You know, my mind wanders when I'm meditating. Yeah, who doesn't,
yeah,
right? Like,
everyone's.
Everyone's does. You are not alone. You are, you know, you are right where you need to be. That's where you need to be. Keep working with it. You're doing the work. So just like bringing a little more acceptance towards yourself and cheering yourself on for the little things. Like if you remember to readjust your posture once today, I'm cheering you on. All right. Like that is success. Right? If you remember to focus on your breath for 3 breaths once today, all right, I'm cheering you on. Like start small. It doesn't have to be big, and be consistent with that one thing until you got it down, and then add on to it.
Exactly. You have to make, like, change happens in small, manageable, sustainable steps. So if you are like, tomorrow I'm going to run 5 miles and like only have smoothies, like, no, you're not gonna feel good. You're not gonna sustain change that way. But if you're like, you know, maybe tomorrow I'll walk around the block and have an extra glass of water. Like, if you keep doing that, you'll start feeling better. And then the more you succeed at it and the kinder you are to yourself about it, the more you'll want to continue that behavior. That compassion is such a key element, and that success is such a key element in continuing to grow and work towards that long-lasting change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, when I was going through yoga teacher training, one of the things that really stood out to me that my teacher kept saying, she kept saying, you know, you are already a success. You were born a success. Right. And if we can start from there, and that's hard for people, you're already a success. I don't feel successful. Right. Like, but I don't have this degree. I don't have this, whatever it is, you know, this fancy business or this brand or this, you know, my art's not where I want it to be, whatever it is, you have to start back farther, all the way to maybe your heartbeat, maybe your breath, you know, maybe just the physical, like here I am, like I am here, here is another day, I am breathing, I am living, my heart is beating, my beautiful mind is working. That is a success. And then we can start from there. We can move forward from there. And I've always found that to be a very valuable thing. And maybe someone listening will too.
Yeah. Well, some cultures and religions tell us like you come out sinned or something is wrong, and others tell us like you come out whole. Right. And it's about maintaining that wholeness and reconnecting to that. And if you kind of approach it in those different ways and bring in, I really love that, bringing like, look at the successes, look at the wholeness of your body and the beautiful ability it has by knowing how to breathe. The heart knows how to beat. You're a miracle as you are with that. So just keep checking back into that and maintain what you already are. That's what this life can be about.
Yes, absolutely. I love that.
Yeah. So what are some of the main issues regarding health and wellness that you notice makers experience?
Yeah, sure. So physical, you know, issues that they experience definitely would be the neck and shoulder pain, hand and wrist pain, you know, anything that's repetitive. And any movement that's repetitive can create pain and strain or even injury. So that's something to think about. If you're sitting all day long, not really, you know, powering through, not getting up for a break, then, you know, that can create its own aches and pains, its own injuries over time, especially in the neck and shoulders, low back. If we're working repetitively, whether we're a potter or a jeweler or a weaver, using our hands, we're doing the same motions over and over and over again, maybe not alternating between tasks because we think it's efficient. And we end up putting our hands and wrists at risk. So, yeah, like definitely it's important to create as much variety as possible. And I talk a lot about this in my book. But creating variety between tasks. You know, it might sound inefficient, but I don't know a lot of makers that can risk, you know, being out of work during the holiday season.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of makers that can risk being out 1 week, let alone 3 or 3 months, you know. So it's important to care for ourselves as and give ourselves some grace to do that.
Yeah, and a lot of the things you're talking about too is like super common that people experience when sitting at the desk all day too. You know, that
Absolutely.
hunching over, typing at the keyboard, carpal tunnel happening. These are like necessary parts of our body for daily function. So we have to take breaks and honor them, like practicing those self massage and all the tips you have in your book are such key components.
Yeah, and like you know, I think taking breaks can even sound intimidating to people because they feel like they don't deserve a break or something. You know, they're different, you know, everyone has their own perspectives, but or they're afraid that they're going to take too long of a break, or if I keep breaking every 20 minutes, I'm never going to get anything done. And you know,
You might get more done though.
you might get more done, right? Like I'm not asking you to take like a 20-minute break every 20 minutes. Let's not get crazy here, right? Like I'm asking you to you know, how about 1 minute of standing and reaching your arms up? How about you know, 3 minutes of walking around your space? How about, you know, a moment where you just, you know, switch positions and move from standing to sitting, or sitting to standing, or, you know, standing to squatting? You know, how about you move to the floor for a little bit and kneel? What positions can you move into? Can you create some variety? It doesn't mean that you have to break, you know, for a long time every 20 minutes. It just means, how about we take that moment to check in, reassess, and readjust? Because that's how we're going to, one, keep the blood flow moving, two, keep our minds, you know, like help our minds to focus better, and ultimately it'll save our hands, save our bodies, because we're moving and shifting into these different types of positions more often.
I love what you're saying here. It reminds me a lot of Dr. Kristen Neff and her work on the science of self-compassion. You know, we kind of go into things thinking like, oh, I need to be hard on myself and tough. And like this voice of our inner critic comes in and thinks like the harder the push, the more I'll achieve, the more successful I'll be. But actually, science shows that global self-criticism will actually decrease our willpower and our ability to get things done. It'll lead to that burnout and that fatigue. But when we practice mindful self-compassion, our willpower increases. We're able to get more done. We, you know, by giving your body breaks, you're taking care of your body in the present moment so that you don't hit that burnout and that fatigue or injuring yourself so that you can't actually physically work later. You're creating more longevity. And it kind of takes us away from the like hustle, go, go, go culture and makes us acknowledge like, maybe we need to slow down. And if we think of like the tortoise and the hare, maybe by slowing down, you actually get there versus, hitting that burnout along the way.
Yeah, I love everything that you're saying. And I think it's a great reminder, even for myself sometimes, you know, I'm like, oh, I love how you're saying that, like to be compassionate towards yourself. I think it's important, you know, for productivity in general, but also one thing that it sparked to my mind was pain being a signal. And I think that this is really important. It's something that I learned and it really stuck with me, right? Like pain is a signal that your body provides you with to signal, to set off an alarm that something needs to be readjusted. So a lot of times what you're saying, like we power through, we keep going. And what we really need to do is just readjust our posture, drink some water, eat some food, right? And if we don't, that signal will go away momentarily. You know, like we might feel like, oh, I have an ache in my back, but I really got to keep moving on this work. Oh, my neck is starting to hurt, but I really got to keep going, and we'll power through. We'll ignore the signal. It'll fade. And when it comes back, it's louder. And then maybe it fades again. and we don't do anything about it. And then it gets louder and louder and louder until we have to do something. And then we're ending up leaving the studio or the workbench or your desk to go home from work, wherever you are. And you're in a lot more pain than when you walked in the door, right? And it's a common thing that, you know, so many people go through. I can't tell you how many times, you know, while I was in graduate school myself, or even undergrad, I pushed through all of those pain signals until I had a headache, until I had, you know, I was so thirsty or so hungry, you know, but I do believe that there is this sweet spot when you're making, you know, there's this moment of making that can kind of get a hold of you in a way where you're in the zone, right? And you think that if you break in 10 minutes, you'll be fine. But that 10 minutes becomes 3 hours very quickly, right? It's like you're in a time warp when you start making. At least this was for me. Has been for me in many ways, where it's like, oh my gosh, 3 hours passed, but I thought I was going to take a break to eat something. You know, I thought that was only 10 minutes ago, and now it's 3 hours, right? But now you're hangry, right? You're lashing out at your loved ones. You know, you're thirsty. You have to pee. You need to stretch because you're all cramped up. Like all of these things. So my advice is to recognize pain as a signal to work with, not to work against, right? Like in retrospect, I could have done some neck stretches, right? I could have focused my attention on my posture. I could have drank enough water. I could have ate enough food. I could have incorporated some simple massage techniques into my day. And all of those things could have taken 30 seconds here, 30 seconds there, not taking any time away from my work. But it ends up taking more in the long run when you work against pain rather than with it. So my advice is to set reminders. And if your phone is too distracting, like many people's are, right? Like you have the alarm go off and all of a sudden you're on Instagram, and then it's like another time warp of its own, right? So if that's too distracting, get a kitchen timer, right? Stick some sticky notes on your wall that remind you to look up, to reach up, to touch your toes, to take a sip of water, and whatever it is, when you see it, go do it real quick, you know.
I think it's important to remember too that, like, as a maker, as an artist, like, you and your body are a part of the art as well. So you have to be taking care of your body. Like, the more you're adequately taking care of your input, the more you're able to output. I've been noticing that, like, with my writing practice in the morning. I was like really regimented about I have to write for this long every morning, no breaks. And then I was like, you know what? Like, what if when I'm hungry, I eat and then I come back to this, and, like, guess what? My brain can think better, and I can create something that's not as, like, crabby feeling or like, get through it. My ability to create is greater when I take care of myself. So again, I think that
and you enjoy it more.
Exactly.
You enjoy it more.
Exactly. So I feel like we've kind of touched on this thread throughout our conversation today. But how do you see wellness expanding beyond the physical? Like, how can taking care of our well-being as makers, encompass the mental, the financial, the creative elements that are all a part of being a maker, being a person?
Yeah, of course. I think even a short walk or a stroll outside in nature can improve blood flow circulation to the brain, like I mentioned earlier, and that releases endorphins, right? And ultimately uplifts your mood, your focus level, and that can be really, really great. As for financial, you know, if we consider not caring for ourselves, like I was saying earlier, like if you don't care for your body, you're not listening to the pain signals, you're not providing, you know, you're providing your body with feedback that you don't want to listen, right? Rather than trying to work with it. Eventually you're going to hit that burnout, you'll hit injury. And most artists, you know, can't risk that. I mean, you can think for yourself whether or not you can risk it. I think it's a very big risk to make. And one of the things I loved when I interviewed Kristen Kiefer many years ago now, I think it was back in 2015, but one of the things she said was to work purposefully inefficient. And I thought it was like a really nice way to think about it. Work purposefully inefficient. So that way, you know, your body feels cared for. That way you set up your space in a way that you're moving around, creating as much variety as possible. So it might not feel efficient in the moment, but ultimately it is. And, all of this, if I think about how does that expand past the physical, because all of those things I just mentioned are very physical. But I do believe that when we feel good in our bodies, our minds feel better. And when we feel good in our minds, our spirit feels better, and we can kind of work through in a more positive light. If you think about, if anyone practices yoga, often in the West, we think of yoga as just movement, asana. There's 8 limbs of yoga, and asana is the movement practice. It's the poses. The poses were created to be able to sit long periods of time in meditation. That is what they were created for. They were not created for a big workout, and to be like, I don't know, doing all these contortionist like poses on Instagram. Like, that's not what it was made for, right? Asana was created to be able to sit comfortably in meditation for long periods of time, to take care, to prepare the mind for meditation. So if we think about that, and then we think about how long we sit, right? Like at the desk, like we sit as long as a lot of those, as a lot of people sit, I don't know, like we sit so long in our desks and our benches, and there's no preparation for it. So if the asana yoga practice was created to be able to sit for long periods of time, I don't know, I think that's kind of like mind-blowing to me, right? Like in a way. And then we just sit in a chair for long periods of time, and then we're like, maybe I'll do something later. Maybe I'll go for a 10-minute walk. I don't have time. It's like, well, how are you going to prepare your body to sit?
I love that comparison so much. I've never thought of it that way, but yeah, like especially when it comes to our art, I know at least for me, like working at the wheel is a meditation. Mm-hmm. Like it completely becomes that. So preparing the body and the mind for that meditative space through movement is such an important element. We have to get that energy moving in our body. And like you said, like creating health within our physical body, our mental body, and our spiritual body, because those are all components that go into the making. Into whatever that making is for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important. And I think that a lot of, yoga classes that are practicing more, the 8 limbs of yoga and asana and pranayama and, the meditation aspect, all of those things, you'll notice that there's this like common thread where the meditation often, there might be considerations in the beginning of class, but meditation typically falls at the end. And that is one of the reasons why. And I think that it's a beautiful thing to consider when we're thinking about how can we take that perspective into our own days. And like, that is something that, many lineages of people, figured out and learned and have been passing down for generation to generation. And, those teachers, we're bringing it all the way back to the teachers in India. We are honoring them for all that they have learned, all that they've practiced for many years to teach us that. And if you're going to say that you practice yoga and all of these things, I think that you should consider this in your own practice. And maybe that means doing a little bit of movement, doing a little bit of meditation in your space right before you begin. Maybe it means before you get in the car to drive over to your office, whatever it is, right? Like maybe it's just an extra 10 minutes to start and see how it feels.
Absolutely. I feel like we've covered this in threads of what you just said and throughout the podcast again as well, but what would be one advice you would give makers to make wellness a component of their creative practice every day?
Hmm. You know, this is a challenge. I think we've touched on a lot of things, but I do think that the consistency aspect is really important. Um, and then connection with your body, right?
Mm.
Like connection and trust again, right? Like if I sit and focus on my breath and connect to my body and notice how I feel in this moment, do I need to readjust? Am I feeling any pain or strain in any areas? How can I breathe and focus in on these sensations? That alone is going to help you build more kinesthetic awareness in the body, which is ultimately going to support you. And if you can just be consistent about checking in to start, that's a great spot to start. That's a great place to begin to craft a new movement pattern. Mm-hmm. And if you want to try something or you need some support, I'm always here for you. There's lots of other, people and resources available to you as well, as I mentioned on the Wellness for Makers podcast. But I do offer free classes. I have a free neck and shoulders relief class. And if you want to take that today, that you can do, right? Like it's not very long. And I will walk you through 3 valuable tips for taking care of your neck and shoulders to find the relief that you deserve, that you can start implementing into your studio, into your workspace, into your office, today. So definitely check that out. Be consistent with what I teach you and try it out. Let me know how it goes.
I love that. So you kind of shared a bit about this already, but what are the other ways? I think that you are supporting us, but how can we support you alongside that? So your podcast, your book, all the things.
Any support. I love it. I really appreciate this. You can follow me on Instagram at Wellness for Makers. I'm there. I am the one that answers all the messages and all the things. So you can feel free to message me anytime. I have free resources available, the free neck and shoulders class. I also have a free movement class to hand and wrist relief. That is very, it's just like 10-minute movement sequence that you can work through and, feel better in your hands, wrists, and forearms. My book is available and I am so happy with how it came out. It was basically a 2-year project during the pandemic. I was so honored when Schiffer Publishing reached out to create this book. And there's a lot of detailed photos on how to get into certain postures and positions. It's not like a workout book, like I'm not just teaching you stretches and things like that. I am helping you understand how to physicalize a lot of this information that we're talking about, how to understand those pain signals, how to understand your walking patterns, how to understand your sitting postures, your standing postures, how to lean towards your work in a way without rounding your neck over, right? So I'm able to go into it in a lot more detail in the book, and with beautiful images. And there's even a movement tracker. These pages that kind of invite you to write in the book, to draw in the book on these movement tracker pages, to kind of, take note of your progress throughout reading it. And I hope that people really enjoy it. I think it came out great.
That's all super helpful. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge. I know that I have your book on my to get list as well. It just sounds like such a great resource as we're all figuring out how to be in our bodies, take care of our bodies and our minds in this life.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation. I think it's been really wonderful to share and connect with you.
Thank you for taking time to listen to the wise one inside of you today. Please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast to help it grow. Until the next time, let's keep taking it one breath at a time.